The Greenwood Royal Hotel's luxurious hall shone like molten gold. Crystal chandeliers spilled their light over the marble floor, over which the city's rich and powerful glided to a stately, slow rhythm. Laughter echoed, champagne fizzed, and every pair of eyes gleamed with desire, or envy. Gabriel Langston stood at the eye of it all, his tall frame dressed in a dashing black tuxedo, his face an unblemished mask of calm self-confidence. 32 and Greenwood City's youngest and most respected CEO, his name opened doors and gagged rivals. But tonight, the sea of faces that adored him seemed strangely distant, as if every smile hidden something and every handshake held menace. He had gone to the gala to celebrate the opening of his company's new medical wing, a project aimed at changing lives. But beneath the thunderous applause, he sensed an undertone of tension. A dark, electric tension that caused his instincts to coil. Gabriel, a soft voice purred behind him. He turned to find Clara Vaughan, his elegant fiancée, her silver gown shimmering like starlight. Her hand slipped into his, her grip a little too firm. "You're not smiling," she whispered, her lips curving in practiced grace. "I'll smile when the vultures stop circling," he murmured, his eyes scanning the crowd. He caught sight of a man in a gray suit standing near the exit, one of his competitors, a man with too much interest in Gabriel's downfall. In a flash, a waiter jostled past him, proffering a glass of champagne. Gabriel hardly faltered in taking it. When he raised the glass to his lips, he felt a tangy bitterness sweep across his tongue, too strong, too unrecognizable. His world grew indistinct. The lights of the chandelier shattered into 1,000 shards of broken stars. Distorted voices, laughter that stretched like echoing sounds in a tunnel. Gabriel blinked, his heart pounding in his ears. He glanced at Clara, her face unreadable, her smile strangely frozen, while the world buckled over sideways. He hardly felt himself falling. And then he was consumed by darkness. Gabriel awoke to the beat of rain. The cold, wet rain. His suit was tainted, hands scraped across wet ground. His mouth coated with the flavor of blood. He tried to stand, but his head throbbed like a hammer blow. He was not in Greenwood City anymore. The forest was dense around him, fog curling between the trees. The sound of thunder faded in the distance. He could hardly recall how he'd gotten there, snatches of headlights, yelling men, a black SUV skidding down a mountain road. And the sound of something gliding nearby. Gabriel slowly wheeled around. His heart jumped as he saw a dark shape bald in the shadows, cold eyes, a darting tongue. A snake. Before he could move away, there came a voice through the rain, gentle, trembling, but urgent. "Don't move." Out of the mist, with bare feet and soaked clothes, came a young woman with a shawl glued to her shoulders. She clutched in one hand a long pole. She advanced, her brown eyes upon the snake, her movements unhurried but determined. Gabriel stared in disbelief as she struck the ground near the reptile, diverting its gaze, then lunged with quick precision. The snake recoiled, hissing, before disappearing into the wet grass. The woman exhaled shakily and dropped the stick. Only then did she look at him properly. "You're hurt," she said, kneeling beside him. Gabriel tried to say something but could think of nothing. Her face was unadorned, no jewelry, no makeup, but there was a steady strength about her eyes that pushed back the turmoil for a moment. "I don't know where I am," he tried to say. "You're near Cedar Hills," she said quietly. "A few miles from Greenwood. You must have been hit off the road. Landslides this week." She took hold of his arm and stood him up. He staggered, his head spinning. "What's your name?" he slurred. She hesitated, then said, "Naomi." "Naomi," he repeated, as if trying to cling to the sound. "And you just saved my life." She turned away her face, flushing. Anyone would have done the same. But he knew better. In Greenwood City, people only helped when cameras were present. When he tried to recall his name, the words were foreign on his lips. I think I'm Gabriel," he stuttered. "But I don't know anything else." Naomi's face softened. "You bumped your head," she whispered. "You must come with me. My place isn't too far, and you need to rest." She took him down a hidden dirt road through the woods, their steps sinking into mud. He tripped more than once, and she caught him with surprising force each time. The rain slowed, giving way to the quiet singing of crickets as they emerged at a small wooden hut nestled beside a stream. Inside, it was warm, lit by the glow of a kerosene lamp. Naomi brought him a towel and a bowl of warm water. "Sit," she said gently. "You're safe here." He sat by the fire, watching her move quietly around the room. There was something almost ethereal about her, like she belonged to a world far from his own. When she turned to him again, he asked, "Why help a stranger?" Naomi smiled faintly, fanning the flames. "Because everyone needs to be found when lost." Gabriel sat in silence for a long period of time. Everything was quiet apart from the patter of rain against the roof. The dawn's first light crept stealthily across the mountains, caressing the mist with gentle touches of pale gold. In the small hut beside the brook, Naomi shifted quietly from her mat. The fire had gone out hours before, and the soft sound of Gabriel's breathing filled the room, peaceful, even, childlike. He had slept all night without fever, and for that she was grateful. She rose slowly, not wanting to disturb him. Her shawl was hanging on the door, soggy from rain the day before. She wrapped it over her shoulders, retrieved a wicker basket from the corner, and exited. The air was fresh and biting, filled with the scent of wet soil and pine. In the woods, a bird cried out, breaking the stillness. Naomi left in the direction of the slope beyond the stream, where wild herbs grew between moss stones. She knew where to pick them, for healing wounds, leaves, for pain-removing, roots. As she worked, she considered the stranger on her floor. Gabriel. There was a nobility to his face, even when he slept. He did not belong to her world, that much was sure. His palms were smooth, unaccustomed to hard work. His clothes, while torn, were of fine quality she had never found in the village. Who was he, really? Why did fate bring him to her doorstep like a wounded bird? She shook the thoughts out. It did not matter who he was. For the moment, he needed assistance, and that was sufficient. When Gabriel awoke, the sun had already streamed into the small hut, diffusing through the cracks in the wooden walls. For a few instants, he lay there, blinking at the strange ceiling. The air smelled of smoke, herbs, and rain. He sat up slowly. His head throbbed dully, and all his muscles ached. He remembered flashes, a glittering hall, a glass, the swirl of headlights, and nothing more. His eyes scanned the little room, a single clay pot on the fire, a wooden chair, a pile of folded clothes on a stool. And nothing of the woman who had rescued him. "Naomi," he whispered. There was no reply. His belly growled in protest, reminding him that he'd not had a bite to eat since, well, he couldn't even say when. He lifted himself up and stumbled towards the corner where a pot was sitting. Lifting back the lid, he found only water, cold clear water, and without any hope. He took a couple of swallows to still the hunger, and then sighed, raking a hand through his snarled hair. He required air. When he came out, the morning sunshine almost blinded him. The village stretched below, a quilt of mud houses, smoke curling from cooking fires, and rolling hills like green waves. He tried to take some unstable steps, trying to get his balance. It was when a rough voice pierced the stillness. "Hey! Who are you?" Gabriel turned. A woman stood a few meters away, holding a bundle of firewood. Her eyes narrowed, scanning his tall figure, his torn suit, and the confusion on his face. "You! Stop right there," she shouted. "Thief! Someone's in Naomi's house." Before Gabriel could respond, her voice rang through the air again, louder, angrier. "Thief! There's a thief at Naomi's place." The quiet was shattered. Doors swung open, footsteps exploded. In mere seconds, half the village surrounded the small hut. Men were carrying sticks, women were speaking in hushed fear. Gabriel threw up his hands in shock. "Please, I'm not." "Liar," one man bellowed. "We've never met you. Where is Naomi?" "I don't know," Gabriel replied, struggling to keep calm. She helped me yesterday. I woke here. I'm not a thief." "Then where is she now?" another shouted. "Maybe you hurt her." The circle closed. A stick swooped at his shoulder, he shied away, and dropped into the mud. His heart was pounding, not out of fear of causing hurt, but out of the absurdity of the whole thing. Was this the way destiny repaid the generosity of his deliverer? Wait. The voice cut through the throng like the sun breaking through a cloud. Naomi appeared on the outskirts of the crowd, her basket pressed to her body, her face pale with terror. She ran forward, pushing the villagers aside. Stop this. He's not a thief, she cried. He's hurt, I brought him in from along the mountain road last night. He's been out since then. The villagers froze, their faces unsure. Naomi released the basket, herbs spilling into the mud. She crouched beside Gabriel, shielding him with her slight frame. He's a guest, she declared, scanning the circle. He would not hurt anyone. Tension slowly dissipated. Some grumbled apologies, others retreated awkwardly. The woman who'd initially screamed rubbed her head, complaining about being careful. But not everyone left. Near the back of the dispersing crowd stood a girl of about 18, Lydia, Naomi's neighbor's daughter. Her eyes lingered on Gabriel a moment too long, tracing the lines of his jaw, the breadth of his shoulders, the way his damp hair clung to his forehead. There was curiosity there, and something else. Gabriel noticed the stare and shifted uncomfortably. His shirt was torn, his chest half exposed where the fabric had been ripped by his fall. Since Lydia's eyes did not fall, he felt a rush of heat rise to his neck. He pushed the torn fabric shut and turned abruptly away, saying a soft, "Thank you," to Naomi. Naomi stood up, brushing mud off her hem. Her face softened when she saw him. "You shouldn't have gone out," she said gently. "Strangers frighten people around here." He nodded, feeling guilty. "I was just starving." She gave him a guilty glance. "I'm sorry. I came to fetch herbs for your wounds. I'll get something ready for you right away." As they stepped back into the tiny hut, the remaining villagers walked off down the track, their grumblings fading. Lydia stood a little longer, her eyes still on the doorway as she wore a strange smile before walking away. Inside, Gabriel sat next to the fire, his head bowed. Naomi knelt at the fire, her fingers moving quickly as she prepared a simple meal. The aroma of boiling porridge filled the hut. He gazed at her gently, feeling a mix of relief and discomfort. That she had confronted the entire village to stand up for him, for this woman to whom he owed nothing, hit at something deep inside his breast. "Naomi," he breathed. She glanced up. "Yes." He hesitated. "You didn't have to defend me like that. I don't even know who I am." The sun lingered over the emerald slopes, its rays spreading like honey melted across the valley. The rich scent of freshly turned earth lingered in the air, mixed with the gentle susurration of wind that rustled through the cornfields. It was a peaceful morning, one of those mornings which made even hardship bearable. Gabriel walked slowly beside Naomi, his step still a little unsure, but his strength returning day by day. The bruises on his arm had faded, the wound on his forehead now only a faint scar. In just a few short weeks, he had learned the rhythm of Naomi's simple life, the early mornings, the quiet prayers before sunrise, and the way she hummed softly to herself while working. They spent the day-to-day working in her vegetable garden and sweet potatoes, a hillside pushed between the rolling hills and edged with wildflowers. Naomi worked with practiced ease, her hands strong, her back low over the ground. Gabriel, awkward at first, had adapted himself to feeling dirt between his fingers, something he would never have considered touching in the world he could no longer remember. Easy with that one, Naomi smiled faintly as he nearly plucked out a sprout of sweet potato rather than a weed. He grinned, swiping sweat from his brow. "I swear, these weeds are more persistent than I was." Naomi giggled softly, her voice causing his heart to feel strangely light. "You're improving," she teased. "Yesterday you came close to uprooting my whole garden." "Well, I'm learning from the master." Their eyes met for a fleeting second, long enough for something unspoken to pass between them. Naomi looked away quickly, her cheeks warming. After a while, she wiped her hands on her apron. "I'll go fetch some water from the stream," she said. "Don't overwork yourself." Gabriel nodded, watching her walk away. The wind played with her shawl, carrying the faint scent of lavender as she disappeared down the narrow path. He sighed, leaning on his hoe. Despite his confusion about who he was, one thing had become clear: he had never felt so at peace before. Naomi's kindness, her quiet strength, her laughter, they had become the rhythm of his days. He hadn't caught sight of Lydia approaching until her shadow moved over the bed of sweet potatoes. She stood on the edge of the field, a wicker basket on her hip, her dress a splash of color against the green. Her smile was sweet, but there was something in her eyes that warned Gabriel to watch out. "Good morning," she said sweetly. "You've been working hard, I see." "Morning," Gabriel replied politely, straightening. "I've brought you some food," she continued, setting down the basket. "I thought you'd be hungry. Naomi's been working so hard lately." He paused. In the basket was roasted maize, a few mangoes, and a small gourd of water, thoughtful, maybe, but her eyes lingered too long, her voice too gentle. "Thanks," he said, stepping back. "That's very kind of you, but Naomi will return soon." Lydia moved closer, her smile stretching thin. "You don't need to sit for her every time," she whispered. "She's honest. You're different from us, Gabriel. Everyone can see it. You could have a better life than wallowing in the muck." He frowned. "Naomi kept me alive," he grunted. "That means more to me than anything you could offer." Her smile faltered. "You don't actually mean that. You've only just met her." Gabriel glared at the ground between them, his fists clenched around the hoe. "Sometimes," he said quietly, his voice firm, "you don't need to have time for a person to appreciate their worth. You just feel it." Lydia opened her eyes in shock. "Are you telling me you like her?" Gabriel looked at her, his eyes forward. And unflickering. "Yes," he said. Matter-of-factly. "I do." Naomi, carrying a clay jug of water, heard the tone at the end of the path. Her breath locked, her heart pounding. In her chest. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but his words struck her like sunlight after rain, sudden, warm, and just a little too beautiful to believe. She stood for what felt like a long time, the world whirling dizzily around her. Then, unable to restrain the burst of feeling inside her, she set down the pot and ran to him. Gabriel had just had time to turn when Naomi wrapped her arms around him, holding him close. For a moment he stood rigid, then his arms went around her naturally, as if they belonged there. "I dreamed it," Naomi gasped on his shoulder, trembling. "Tell me I did." "You're not," he growled softly, his heart racing. "Naomi, everything I said, I meant." Lydia stood behind them, immobile, her face aflame with anger and shame. The basket she held at her feet teetered and the mangoes spilled onto the ground. She whirled about, her feet pounding the trail as she walked off, muttering curses. Naomi and Gabriel stood frozen, their mouths inches apart. Neither moved for a moment, there was no point. The silence said everything. Finally, Naomi glanced down at the destroyed fruit and smiled faintly through tears. "At least we won't starve today." Gabriel smiled gently, leaning down to grasp a mango. "Then let's not waste her effort." The coming months were a lingering, sweet dream. The man Naomi had drawn from the mountains was now her best gift, her partner, her strength, her low-key joy. Gabriel was whole again, and though his memory of the past remained a blur, his new life in Greenwood Valley filled every empty space in his heart. They worked together, side by side in the sun, tilling the fields. He tilled, and she sowed, they laughed as they yanked weeds, and in the evening sat outside their small cabin, watching the light fade over the fields. When Gabriel did make his proposal to Naomi, it was not dramatic or theatrical. He simply took her hand one evening and spoke in a low whisper, "I don't know who I used to be, but I know who I am when I'm with you." Naomi's smile flared up, her eyes sparkling. "And who is that?" "A man who wants to spend the rest of his life at your side." She did not need to hesitate. Her eyes welled up with tears, and she nodded. "Then you already have my forever." Their wedding day arrived amidst laughter and music that echoed across the valley. Dressed in their best, the villagers stood under a flower arch to witness Naomi stroll barefoot down the aisle in a white, straight wedding dress. Gabriel was wearing an everyday shirt but possessed a tall frame and friendly eyes that caught everyone's attention who glanced at him. The moment they exchanged vows, a fierce wind swept over the fields as if the heavens themselves were consecrating their marriage. The mob lost it, some were overjoyed, others were filled with envy. "Naomi really found her treasure," one woman whispered, "she preserved him, and he saved her in return, another woman smiled. For Naomi and Gabriel, it was not a matter of fortune or fate. It was love, pure, constant, and true. Months afterward, they were filled with laughter again in the hut when Naomi delivered a baby boy. The newborn's cries filled the morning air, mixed with the chirping of birds outside. Naomi cried tears of joy as she held her son. "Leon," Gabriel whispered, smiling in tears. "He'll be our light." Naomi smiled faintly, tired but glowing. "Our little Leon," she said, kissing the baby's forehead. Days turned into weeks, and happiness seemed to have finally found a permanent home in their lives. Gabriel would rise early, tend the farm, and return home to find Naomi singing softly to Leon. Their hut was small, their meals simple, yet the warmth between them filled every corner. At night, they'd sit together by the doorway, Leon sleeping peacefully in Naomi's arms, while Gabriel watched the stars. "This," he would whisper, "is all I ever wanted." Naomi would nestle her head against his shoulder. "Then pray that it never changes." But fate has a vicious habit of testing vows made in times of peace. It was just another night, the sky painted in soft gold as Gabriel returned from the fields, his hoe on his shoulder. Dark clouds were piling up far over the hills, but he paid it no mind. Rain in the season was to be expected, and Naomi had dinner waiting for him with warm porridge and their baby boy's guffaws. Halfway to home, he paused to catch his breath alongside the stream, where rippling water repeated the hues of the dying sky. And then he heard it, a boom in the distance. He had thought at first it might be thunder. But as ground beneath his feet began to tremble, he glanced up in terror. A mountain of boulders and earth was beginning to break loose from the hillside above, booming, unstoppable, devouring everything in its path. "Naomi!" His shout was raw across the wind. He whirled to run, but too late. The hillside gave way beneath him, and the world was anarchy, a demented whirl of mud, water, and wreckage swept everything before it. Down below, Naomi heard the sound and ran from the hut, clinging to Leon. Her heart bounded as she saw the brown torrent boiling down the mountain. "Gabriel," she yelled into the tempest. Her call was lost to the rumble of rain and earth. Heaven wept as the flood tore through their plants and trees, casting ruin and stillness. After the tempest had passed, the only thing remaining was mud, and a lone shoe half buried beside the hill's foot. Naomi fell to the ground, Leon crying in her arms, her words breaking into a whisper that night's wind carried away. "Please, not him." The tempest raged on deep into the night, and in the end, it left Greenwood Valley waterlogged in silence. What used to be green and peaceful now lay under mud and desolation. Naomi, barefoot and trembling, struggled through the wreckage, Leon clutched tightly in her arms. Her cries of Gabriel rang out faintly across the valley, unheard. "Gabriel! Gabriel, please!" A far-off groan responded to her. She stood there, heart pounding, then ran towards it, slipped and fell in the mud until she reached him. Gabriel was half buried with the fallen earth and debris, blood trickling down his temple, his body cold and rigid. His face, so full of life before, was pale and unfamiliar, covered in grime. "No, no, no!" Naomi screamed, kneeling beside him. She brushed the mud from his face with shaking hands, pressing her ear against his chest. His heartbeat was faint, faint but present. "Help! Somebody, please!" she screamed into the blackness. Her voice was ringing out over the valley, and soon a couple of villagers came out with lanterns, their faces screwed up in shock. They helped to hoist Gabriel off the ground and carried him through the rain to the tiny local clinic that stood on the outskirts of the village. Inside, the air was cold, thick with wet wood and herb scents. Naomi clung to Leon as the villagers set Gabriel down on the creaking wooden bed. "Please," she begged the duty nurse. "He lives. You have to save him." The nurse, whose eyes looked weary, examined him under the flickering lamplight, before summoning the local doctor, a thin man with trembly hands who arrived minutes later. And at last, after all those years of silence, the doctor looked at Naomi, his face grim. "He's alive," he said. "But the head injury, it's serious." Naomi's throat tightened. "He'll be fine, won't he? Please tell me yes." The doctor did not glance at her. "I wish I could, but his condition is precarious. If he does recover, he'll never be the same again." "What does that mean?" she had asked, her voice shattering. He hesitated before speaking the words that would shatter her world. He might never wake up fully, my dear. The head injury, it's bad. He might remain in a vegetative state for the rest of his life. Naomi blinked in disbelief. No, no, you're lying, she cried, shaking her head violently. He's strong. He talks to me. He'll open his eyes any minute. Gabriel. Her knees gave way beneath her, and she collapsed to the floor beside the bed, her cries echoing through the tiny room. The villagers stood back quietly, their faces filled with pity. Leon began to whimper in her arms, small and pathetic, a sound that cut through the blackness. Naomi wrapped him close, cradling him as tears streamed down her face. Why, she whispered brokenly. Why would God take everything from me? Haven't I suffered enough? Her family was all gone, lost to disease and the vagaries of time. She had nothing, no parents, no siblings, no home but the small hut Gabriel had built for her. And now, the man who had re-taught her how to believe in love was lying motionless before her, his breathing shallow, eyes closed to everything. The physician sighed and parted from her with whispered apologies. The villagers disappeared one by one until only Naomi remained, kneeling on the freezing earth, clutching her infant, staring at the men whom she loved more than life itself. She sobbed for hours until there were no more tears to cry. Her body trembled with fatigue, yet she refused to leave Gabriel's bedside. She reached out occasionally and took his hand, pressing it into her cheek. I'll take care of you, she whispered through the tears. Even if you don't wake up, I'll still take care of you. You saved me once, Gabriel, now it's my turn. Outside, the rain started again, soft and constant, as if the heavens themselves wept for her. Naomi didn't know how she would make it, how she would feed her baby, or how she would pay the bills that would surely arrive. The ensuing weeks were heavy with silence. The clinic had done everything they could for Gabriel, but months passed instead of weeks, and his eyes would not open. He breathed, but his body no longer heeded him. He lived, but he was not living. Naomi took him home, not allowing him to endure the cold, lonely ward. She gently laid him in their creaky old bed, where they had shared hushed dreams and laughed together before. Now, there was only the faint rhythm of his shallow breathing in the silence. Leon, though yet a little baby, wept through the nights, his hunger increasing as Naomi lost her strength. She was no longer able to sleep. Every morning saw her in the fields, collecting herbs, washing for neighbors, or bearing heavy water jugs for a few pennies. When she returned home, her fingers ached, her clothes soaking sweat and mud. But even before sitting down for a meal, she would feed Leon, then wash Gabriel's face, change his bedding, and speak softly to him, as if speaking softly to him would call him back. Please, Gabriel, open your eyes. Just once. I don't know how much longer I can do this alone. Certain days she felt that she saw his jerky fingers, or his lips tighten a bit, but hope was gone at the arrival of the twilight. The villagers first sympathized with her. They presented maize flour, firewood, or vegetables they did not consume. Some of them helped her wash Gabriel or fetch water. But sympathy has limits, and poverty, though it was shared, is a burden. Years went by, and the people who visited her fewer. Gossip began. She's cursed, someone would murmur in the market. She ought to have left him to die that evening, another would reply harshly. Maybe she did invite such upon herself, marrying a man she did not know from nowhere. Lydia, who still carried the sting of rejection, was the loudest among them. She would linger around the well, gossiping with the women, her tones laced with mockery. I told her so. That man brought only bad luck. See her now, toiling for a man who does not even blink. Maybe the spirits are punishing her pride. The words reached Naomi's ears more times than she cared to admit. At first, she ignored them. But as her body grew frail and her stomach remained empty, the cruelty began to bite deeper than hunger ever could. One night, as the chill winds blew through the crevices in her hut, Naomi sat next to Gabriel, her eyes hollow with weariness. Leon lay in her lap, his tiny chest lifting and falling slowly. I'm so tired, she breathed. So tired, Gabriel, but I will not quit. If I quit, we will die. Her voice broke, and she rested her forehead against his unresponsive hand. Wake up, dear, come back to me, please. I don't mind if you never recall my name. Just wake up. But the silence responded to her again. Years passed into months, and Naomi was a shadow of her former self. Her once smooth hands were now cracked and dry, her back bent from years of hard work. She toiled on other people's farms for scraps of food, cleaned their floors for a few pieces of money, and went hungry for days at times so Leon could eat. There were some days when she would faint out of exhaustion in the fields, her body trembling with fever and hunger. A few humane neighbors would take her home and feed her, but their sympathy was always fleeting. When she fell sick one year, a mean cough that left her weak and dizzy, no one arrived. She huddled on the hard floor beside Gabriel's bed, clutching Leon close to her, praying to get through another night. God, she gasped, her voice frail, don't take me yet, my boy still needs me. For 2 days, she drifted between sleep and delirium, until the fever finally broke. When she woke, she was too weak to move, but she was alive. She crawled to Gabriel's side and looked at him, tears spilling silently down her cheeks. We're still here, she whispered. We're still fighting. By the 5th year, Naomi's hope had withered, but her resolve had not. She worked for everyone and anyone, carrying baskets, digging trenches, washing clothes. Leon, now 5, followed her quietly, never complaining even when his stomach rumbled. He had learned early that food was a luxury, not a right. Other nights, Naomi woke to find their small garden raided, her beloved vegetables stolen, footprints testifying to the presence of neighbors who had broken into her place. She would pursue them, but they would merely shrug. You have bad luck anyway, one man sneered. You should thank us for not stealing your house too. Naomi didn't say anything. She just walked away, clutching Leon's hand very tightly as she cried. The rumor had already turned to insults. She'll curse us all. The spirits are angry because she won't let go of the half-dead man. Her boy will be cursed to grow up. And so, on a fateful afternoon, the elders sat in judgment beneath the great fig tree. Naomi, her son, and her dark and brooding husband were to leave Greenwood Valley. They called it a cleansing. When Naomi heard the verdict, she sank to her knees, her body shaking as she pleaded with them to reconsider. Please, where will I go? He needs to be taken care of. My son is still young. We have nothing. But their faces were unyielding, their minds made up. It's for the benefit of the village, one of the elders snapped. You've brought enough ill fortune on us. Lydia was among the crowd, sneering as Naomi wept. The next day, Naomi had loaded what little she owned, an old blanket, tattered clothing, a tin cup, and a worn mat. Leon perched on her back and in front of her marched a donkey cart in which Gabriel was unconscious, going down the dusty road from Greenwood Valley. She did not glance back. The rain had stopped 3 days ago. But the mountain still smelled like death. Cold mud covered what remained of the small village path, and broken trees leaned dangerously over the hillside like silent witnesses to tragedy. Naomi stood outside the tiny house, staring at the cloudy sky with swollen eyes. She had not truly slept in weeks. Maybe months. Inside the house, Gabriel still had not moved. The doctors from the nearest town had already said their piece. If they could even be called doctors. He may never wake up. He's alive, but barely. You should prepare yourself. Prepare herself. How was she supposed to prepare herself to bury the only person who had ever truly loved her? Naomi tightened her grip on the wooden doorway. Her hands had become rough over the years. Not from age. From survival. Behind her, a weak cough came from inside the house. Leon. Naomi quickly wiped her eyes before turning around. The little boy sat near the bed, watching his father silently. Too silently. At 6 years old, Leon already understood suffering more than most adults. Mother, he whispered softly. Naomi forced a smile. Yes. Will father wake up today? The question stabbed her the same way it did every single morning. But she still knelt beside him gently. Maybe, she whispered. Leon looked back at Gabriel's motionless body. His small face carried hope that reality did not deserve. Naomi reached out and touched her son's cheek carefully. He was growing thinner again. That worried her more than anything. Food had become difficult. Very difficult. Ever since the landslide destroyed most of the farms nearby, the village itself had started collapsing slowly. People barely had enough for themselves. And helping Naomi? That had stopped long ago. At first, they pitied her. Then they grew tired of her tragedy. Now, most of them avoided her completely. Some even blamed her. She brought bad luck. That man came from nowhere. Ever since she married him, disaster followed. Naomi had heard everything. Silently. Because defending yourself becomes exhausting when life keeps beating you anyway. A knock suddenly sounded at the door. Naomi stood slowly. When she opened it, she found old Mama Ruth standing outside holding a small sack. The elderly woman sighed heavily the moment she saw Naomi's face. "You haven't eaten properly again." Naomi shook her head quickly. "We're okay." Mama Ruth clicked her tongue. "That is the problem with you. You keep saying you're okay while disappearing before our eyes." She handed Naomi the sack. "A little flour. Some potatoes. Not much. But enough to survive another day." Naomi's eyes immediately became wet. "Mama Ruth, you shouldn't have. And leave my stubborn daughter to starve," the old woman snapped gently. Naomi lowered her eyes. "You already helped too much." Mama Ruth glanced toward Gabriel inside the house. Her expression softened sadly. "He still hasn't moved." Naomi shook her head. Silence fell between them. Heavy. Painful. Then Mama Ruth spoke quietly. "You cannot continue like this, Naomi." Naomi's chest tightened immediately. Because she already knew where this conversation was going. "The village is changing," Mama Ruth continued softly. "People are struggling. Jobs are disappearing. Hunger is everywhere." Naomi looked away. "You need to leave." Those words finally broke something inside her. Leave. This village was all she had ever known. "This is my home," Naomi whispered weakly. Mama Ruth's eyes filled with sadness. "No," she said quietly. She looked toward Gabriel again. Then toward little Leon. "Those two are your home." Naomi felt tears slide down her cheeks immediately. Because deep down, she knew the old woman was right. Staying here meant dying slowly. Not just for her. For Leon too. And Leon deserved better. That night, Naomi sat beside Gabriel's bed again. The candlelight flickered softly across his face. He still looked peaceful. Too peaceful. Like a man sleeping through a life that refused to stop hurting the people around him. Naomi held his hand gently. The same hand that once built wooden chairs for her. The same hand that once held her under the stars while promising her forever. "You promised me you would stay," she whispered brokenly. Her tears fell silently onto his hand. "I don't know how much longer I can do this." Behind her, Leon slept curled on the floor beneath a thin blanket. Even in sleep, the boy looked exhausted. Naomi stared at her son for a long moment. Then back at Gabriel. And finally, she made the hardest decision of her life. The next morning, the villagers watched quietly as Naomi loaded a few belongings onto an old wooden cart. There wasn't much. Some clothes. Blankets. Cooking utensils. And Gabriel. Still unconscious. Still silent. Leon held tightly onto Naomi's skirt as she adjusted the ropes carefully. Some villagers watched with pity. Others with relief. No one stepped forward to stop her. Only Mama Ruth approached slowly. "You'll write if you can?" the old woman asked. Naomi nodded weakly. Though both of them knew she probably couldn't. Mama Ruth pulled her into a tight embrace. "You are stronger than this world deserves," she whispered painfully. Naomi broke down immediately. Not loudly. Just quietly. The kind of crying that comes from carrying too much pain for too long. "I'm scared," she admitted. Mama Ruth held her tighter. "I know." A long silence followed. Then finally, Naomi pulled away. She looked back at the tiny house one last time. The only place she had ever called home. The place where she had found love. And lost it. Then she grabbed the cart tightly. And began walking. One step. Then another. Leon walked beside her silently. Behind them, the village slowly disappeared into the mist. Naomi did not look back again. Because some goodbyes hurt too much to witness twice. The road ahead was long. Cold. Uncertain. But for the first time in years, Naomi understood something terrifying. No one was coming to save them. Not the village. Not fate. Not even Gabriel. If they survived, it would be because she refused to let them die. And somewhere deep inside her exhausted heart, that realization quietly transformed her. Not into someone fearless, but into something stronger. A mother with nothing left to lose. The city did not welcome people like Naomi. It swallowed them. Quietly. Without apology. By the third day, her feet were bleeding. The wooden cart had become heavier with every mile, its old wheels groaning against the rough road while Gabriel's unconscious body remained still beneath the blankets. Leon pushed beside her with his tiny hands whenever the road became too steep. Even though he was barely strong enough. Careful, Naomi whispered weakly whenever he stumbled. But the truth was, they were all stumbling now. The little money Naomi carried from the village disappeared faster than she expected. A cheap room for one night. Medicine for Gabriel. A little food for Leon. Everything cost money. And suffering did not make things cheaper. By the time they finally reached the outskirts of the city, Naomi was already exhausted beyond words. Tall buildings stretched endlessly ahead of them, cold and unfamiliar. Cars moved quickly. People rushed past each other without looking twice. No one noticed them. A poor woman dragging an unconscious man and a tired child through the streets was just another sad story in a city full of them. Leon stared around nervously. Mother. Naomi looked down immediately. Yes. Are we going to live here now? The question nearly broke her. Because she didn't know. Still. She forced herself to smile softly. Yes. Leon nodded quietly. Trusting her completely. That trust terrified her more than poverty ever could. The room they eventually found was barely livable. A tiny single-room structure hidden behind an old apartment building. The walls were cracked. The roof leaked slightly. The air smelled damp. But it was cheap. And cheap was all Naomi could afford. She lowered Gabriel carefully onto the small bed while Leon sat silently in the corner watching her. The little boy no longer asked when his father would wake up every hour. Now he only asked once a day. Sometimes not even that. Children adapt to pain too quickly. That was the cruelest thing Naomi had learned. That night, Naomi sat on the floor counting the remaining coins in her hand. Not enough. Not even close. Rent was due weekly. Food was running out. Gabriel needed medicine. And she had no work. Naomi pressed trembling fingers against her forehead. For a brief moment, she wanted to cry. To scream. To collapse. But then she looked at Leon sleeping beside Gabriel. Curled up carefully against the bed like he was guarding his father. And Naomi swallowed every tear. Because mothers don't always get the luxury of breaking down. The next morning, she began searching for work. It was harder than she imagined. Much harder. Most places rejected her before she even finished speaking. No experience. We're full. You can leave your number. Some men looked at her differently. Not as a worker. But as something vulnerable. Something desperate. One restaurant owner smiled in a way that made Naomi uncomfortable immediately. You're pretty, he said slowly. Naomi already knew what kind of job he was offering before he finished talking. She left immediately. By evening, her legs felt numb. But she still had nothing. When she returned to the room, Leon immediately sat up. Did you find work? Naomi hesitated. Just slightly. Then smiled softly. Not yet. Leon lowered his eyes quietly. Trying not to look disappointed. Trying to be strong for her. At 7 years old. That hurt more than anything. Naomi quickly opened the small paper bag she carried. I brought bread, she said. Leon's face brightened instantly. But the smile disappeared moments later when Naomi split the small loaf into 3 pieces. One for him. One for herself. One beside Gabriel's bed. Father can't eat, Leon whispered sadly. Naomi forced another smile. He will one day. She didn't know if she believed that anymore. But she needed Leon to believe it. Days turned into weeks. Eventually, Naomi found work washing dishes at a small roadside restaurant. The pay was miserable. The hours were brutal. But it was work. She left before sunrise and returned after dark every single day. Her hands became rougher. Her back constantly ached. Still, it wasn't enough. Some nights, she skipped meals so Leon could eat more. Other nights, she lied about already eating at work. Leon noticed. Of course he did. Children who grow up around suffering learn how to read silence. One evening, Naomi returned home exhausted and found Leon sitting beside a tiny charcoal stove. Steam rose from a small pot. Naomi froze. Leon. The boy looked up nervously. I tried making soup. Naomi rushed forward immediately. Where did you get this? Leon hesitated. The market. Something inside Naomi tightened painfully. Did you steal? Leon quickly shook his head. Too quickly. Naomi's heart sank immediately. The little boy lowered his eyes in shame. There was leftover vegetables on the ground, he whispered weakly. The sellers were throwing them away. Silence. Naomi stared at the pot while guilt crashed into her chest like a storm. Her son. Her little boy. Was searching garbage markets for food. And suddenly, everything became too heavy. Naomi turned away quickly, covering her mouth before Leon could see her cry. Mother, he whispered carefully. That one word shattered her completely. She knelt down suddenly and pulled him tightly into her arms. Holding him harder than she ever had before. I'm sorry, she broke down softly. I'm so sorry. Leon hugged her back immediately. It's okay, he whispered. No. It wasn't okay. That was the problem. Nothing about this was okay. That night, after Leon fell asleep, Naomi sat beside Gabriel again. The candle flickered weakly across his unmoving face. Her exhaustion had gone beyond physical pain now. It lived inside her bones. You were supposed to wake up, she whispered bitterly through tears. Silence answered her again. The same silence she had endured for years. Naomi lowered her head onto the bed beside his hand. I don't know how much longer I can protect him alone. Outside, rain began falling softly against the roof. Inside, the room felt colder than ever. But even then, Naomi still reached for Gabriel's hand before closing her eyes. Still held onto him. Still loved him. Because sometimes love survives long after hope dies. Winter arrived quietly. Not with snow. But with hunger. The cold crept through the cracks in the tiny room every night, settling into the walls, the floor, and the bones of the people living inside it. Naomi noticed Leon shivering in his sleep long before he admitted he was cold. So she started giving him the thicker blanket. Pretending she preferred the thin one. Leon noticed that too. But like his mother, he said nothing. That was the thing about suffering. If it stayed long enough, silence became part of survival. By now, Leon had stopped acting like a child. And Naomi hated it. He woke himself up in the mornings. Swept the room before she returned from work. Fetched water from the public tap. Watched over Gabriel quietly for hours. Sometimes Naomi would return exhausted from the restaurant and find Leon softly reading old newspapers beside the bed. Teaching himself words. Numbers. Anything he could understand. Where did you learn that? Naomi asked once, surprised. Leon shrugged shyly. The newspaperman throws some away. Naomi stared at him silently. The little boy smiled nervously. I clean his stall sometimes. That answer crushed her more than it should have. Because Leon never asked for toys anymore. Never asked for sweets. Never asked why other children wore better clothes. He simply adapted. Quietly. Painfully. And the worst part? He never complained. Not once. One evening, Naomi returned home limping slightly. Her hands were red and swollen from hours in hot water and soap. The restaurant owner had fired 2 workers that week, meaning everyone else worked twice as hard for the same miserable pay. She tried hiding the limp. But Leon noticed immediately. Mother. Naomi smiled quickly. I'm okay. Leon stood silently for a moment. Then walked toward the small bag near the stove. I saved some bread for you. Naomi froze. You didn't eat. Leon shook his head. I ate at the market. Naomi knew immediately that was a lie. A terrible one. Her chest tightened painfully. Leon. But the boy simply smiled softly. I wasn't hungry. That was when Naomi realized something terrifying. Her son had started protecting her emotionally. A child. Protecting his mother from guilt. That night, after Leon fell asleep beside Gabriel's bed, Naomi sat alone near the window staring into the darkness outside. The city lights looked beautiful from far away. But beauty meant nothing when you were starving inside it. She pressed trembling fingers against her eyes. She was tired. Not normal tired. The kind of tired that slowly empties a person from the inside. And worst of all, she was beginning to fear the future. Not for herself. For Leon. Because she could survive suffering. But her son deserved more than survival. Her thoughts were interrupted by movement behind her. Gabriel's fingers twitched slightly. Naomi froze instantly. Her entire body went still. Then she rushed to the bed so fast she nearly stumbled. Gabriel. Her voice trembled violently. His hand moved again. Just slightly. Barely noticeable. But after years of stillness, it felt like a miracle. Gabriel. Naomi grabbed his hand tightly, tears already flooding her eyes. For one terrifyingly hopeful moment, she believed he was waking up. But then, silence again. Stillness again. Nothing. Naomi's hope shattered so quickly it physically hurt. She lowered her forehead against his chest and cried quietly, trying not to wake Leon. You can't keep doing this to me, she whispered brokenly. You can't keep giving me hope only to disappear again. Behind her, Leon slowly opened his eyes. The little boy watched his mother silently from the floor. Watched her shoulders shaking softly in the darkness. And for the first time in his young life, Leon understood something deeply painful. His mother was breaking. Slowly. Quietly. And she was trying to hide it from him. The next morning, Leon woke up earlier than usual. Very early. Naomi was still asleep beside Gabriel's bed, exhausted after another sleepless night. Leon looked at her carefully. Then at the nearly empty food container nearby. Silence filled the room. The little boy stood quietly. Put on his oversized sweater. And slipped outside alone. The city was colder than usual that morning. People hurried through the streets while Leon walked carefully between them carrying a small sack. He went straight to the market. The sellers already knew him. Some ignored him. Others pitied him. One woman threw spoiled vegetables toward him carelessly. Take those before I throw them away. Leon quickly picked them up. Thank you. The woman paused slightly after hearing his polite voice. Her eyes softened briefly. You should be in school. Leon smiled faintly. Maybe one day. Then he walked away before she could say anything else. A few hours later, Leon sat near a bakery watching people buy warm bread through the window. The smell alone made his stomach ache. He swallowed hard and looked away quickly. Then something caught his attention. A wealthy woman stepped out of a black car nearby. Elegant. Graceful. Clearly important. Leon immediately moved aside politely so he wouldn't block her path. But as she passed him, a strong wind suddenly blew several papers from her handbag into the street. Without thinking, Leon ran after them. Cars honked loudly as he grabbed the papers quickly before they scattered farther. The woman turned sharply in surprise. "Careful," she gasped. Leon hurried back and handed the papers to her respectfully. "Here." The woman stared at him for a moment. Noticing the oversized sweater, worn shoes, thin face, but strangely intelligent eyes. Then her gaze softened. "Thank you." Leon nodded shyly. "You're welcome." The woman hesitated slightly, then glanced toward the bakery window. "Have you eaten?" Leon immediately answered the way he always did. "Yes." But his stomach betrayed him instantly with a loud growl. The woman's expression changed completely. Not pity. Something deeper. Sadness. Leon lowered his eyes immediately in embarrassment. And somehow, that moment would quietly change all of their lives forever. Mrs. Eleanor Baker had spent most of her life around powerful people. Politicians. Executives. Men who believed money could solve everything. But somehow, the little boy standing outside the bakery unsettled her more than any of them ever had. Maybe it was his eyes. Children living in poverty usually carried one of two things: fear or bitterness. Leon carried neither. Only exhaustion. And that frightened her. "You're alone?" she asked gently. Leon shook his head quickly. "No. I have my mother." Something about the way he said it made Eleanor pause. Not proudly. Not casually. Protectively. As if his mother was the only thing standing between him and the world. Eleanor glanced toward the bakery again. Then back at him. "Come inside." Leon hesitated immediately. "I should go home. Just for a few minutes." Another hesitation. Then his stomach growled again. Leon looked down in embarrassment. And Eleanor's heart broke quietly. Inside the bakery, warmth wrapped around him instantly. The smell of fresh bread nearly made him dizzy. Eleanor watched carefully as Leon tried not to stare too much at the food around him. Even hungry. He was trying to remain polite. "What would you like?" she asked. Leon shook his head quickly. "Anything is okay." That answer hurt more than if he had demanded everything. Eleanor ordered quietly for him. Warm bread. Tea. A small meal. Leon stared at the table once the food arrived. Almost uncertain. "You can eat," Eleanor said softly. The little boy looked at her carefully. "Really?" Eleanor smiled sadly. "Yes." Leon immediately whispered. "Thank you." Then he began eating. Not greedily. Not wildly. Carefully. Slowly. Trying not to look desperate even though he clearly was. Eleanor watched silently. And the more she watched him, the more unsettled she became. Because there was something strangely familiar about the boy. Not his face exactly. Something else. The eyes. The mannerisms. Even the way he held himself quietly. It reminded her of someone. Someone she had lost years ago. But that was impossible. "Where do you live?" she asked gently. Leon hesitated. Then explained carefully about the small rented room. His mother. His father. Though when he spoke about Gabriel, his voice softened differently. "He's sick," Leon said quietly. "How long?" Leon lowered his eyes. "Almost my whole life." Eleanor's chest tightened immediately. Your mother takes care of him alone. Leon nodded proudly. She works very hard. The way he said it made Eleanor realize something heartbreaking. This little boy admired his mother more than anything in the world. And suddenly, she wanted to meet the woman who raised him. That evening, Leon returned home carrying a small paper bag carefully against his chest. Naomi immediately stood up in alarm the moment she saw it. Leon. The little boy smiled brightly for the first time in weeks. A kind woman bought food for us. Naomi's expression instantly filled with worry instead of relief. You accepted food from strangers. Leon's smile faded slightly. She was nice. Naomi crouched quickly in front of him. You cannot trust everyone in the city. Leon lowered his eyes. I know. The quiet sadness in his voice immediately made Naomi feel guilty. She sighed softly and touched his cheek gently. I'm sorry. Then she looked inside the paper bag. Bread. Fruit. Even medicine. Naomi froze. Medicine. Her eyes slowly moved toward Gabriel's bed. Tears immediately burned behind her eyes. Because it had been months since she could properly afford medicine for him. Mother. Leon whispered carefully. Naomi quickly looked away so he wouldn't see her cry. She helped us a lot, he continued softly. Naomi nodded silently. Too overwhelmed to speak. That night, for the first time in months, Leon and Naomi ate until they were full. Not much. But enough. And somehow, that small miracle felt almost dangerous. Because hope becomes terrifying after too much disappointment. Days passed. Then one afternoon, Eleanor returned. Naomi nearly panicked when she saw the elegant black car stop outside the building. People in the neighborhood immediately stared. Whispered. Women like Eleanor Baker did not belong in places like this. Naomi quickly wiped her hands nervously against her dress as Eleanor approached. You must be Leon's mother. Her voice was calm. Warm. Naomi bowed her head slightly. Yes. Eleanor smiled gently. He's a remarkable boy. Naomi's exhausted face softened immediately. He is. That answer came without hesitation. Without doubt. Because no matter how hard life became, Leon remained the brightest thing in it. Eleanor glanced around the poor surroundings carefully. Not judgmentally. Sadly. Then her eyes slowly moved toward the room behind Naomi. Toward the bed. Toward Gabriel. And suddenly, everything inside her stopped. Her breathing became uneven. No. No. Eleanor stepped forward slowly. As if afraid reality would disappear if she moved too fast. Naomi frowned slightly. Madam. But Eleanor barely heard her. Her eyes remained fixed on Gabriel's face. Older. Thinner. Changed by years of suffering. But unmistakable. The cup in her hand slipped from her fingers and shattered loudly onto the floor. Naomi jumped in shock. Madam. Eleanor's lips trembled violently. Her entire body shaking now. Impossible. Her grandson had died years ago. Hadn't he? The whole family believed it. The police believed it. Everyone believed it. Yet the man lying unconscious in front of her looked exactly like Gabriel Baker. Her Gabriel. Naomi stared at the elderly woman in confusion as tears suddenly flooded Eleanor's eyes. Then finally, Eleanor whispered the words that would change everything. Gabriel. Naomi froze instantly. The room suddenly felt too small. Too silent. Too dangerous. Because for the first time in years, the past had finally found them. Naomi's heartbeat became uneven. The name echoed inside the tiny room like something forbidden. Gabriel. Eleanor Baker stood frozen near the bed, trembling visibly as she stared at the unconscious man. Years of grief. Years of mourning. Years of believing he was dead. And now, here he was. breathing. Alive. Naomi instinctively stepped closer to Gabriel's bed. Protective. Confused. Afraid. You know him? She asked carefully. Eleanor slowly looked at her. Tears streamed silently down her face now. Know him, she whispered weakly. Then she looked back at Gabriel again. He's my grandson. Silence exploded through the room. Naomi felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Grandson. Her eyes immediately returned to Gabriel's face. Then to Leon. Then back to Eleanor. Nothing made sense anymore. You must be mistaken, Naomi whispered quickly. Almost desperately. But Eleanor shook her head immediately. No. Her voice broke painfully. I would know him anywhere. She slowly approached the bed again, trembling fingers reaching toward Gabriel's face. The same face she thought she buried years ago. The same boy she raised after his parents died. The same grandson who vanished after that terrible night. Oh my God, Eleanor whispered through tears. You're alive. Naomi stood frozen beside Leon, unable to process what was happening. Leon looked between the two women nervously. Mother. Naomi immediately held him closer protectively. Eleanor slowly turned toward the little boy. Her eyes widened again. And suddenly, another realization hit her. Leon's eyes. Gabriel's eyes. The resemblance was impossible to ignore once she truly looked. Her hand covered her mouth instantly. This child. Naomi's chest tightened. He's Gabriel's son. Eleanor nearly collapsed. Years. She had spent years grieving alone in a mansion filled with silence and regret. And now suddenly, her grandson was alive. And he had a child. A family. Tears streamed uncontrollably down her face now. Leon stared at her uncertainly. Are you crying because of father? He asked softly. That simple question shattered whatever composure Eleanor had left. She nodded weakly. Yes. Leon hesitated slightly. Then quietly walked toward her. He's sick, he explained gently, like he was comforting her now. But mother says he might wake up one day. Eleanor broke completely. She pulled the little boy into her arms suddenly and cried harder than she had in years. Naomi stood silently beside them, overwhelmed. Confused. Terrified. Because deep down, she already understood something dangerous. If Gabriel truly belonged to a powerful family, then everything was about to change. And change terrified her. That evening, Eleanor refused to leave. She called doctors immediately. Real doctors. Specialists. People Naomi could never dream of affording. The tiny room suddenly filled with activity. Medical equipment. Assistants. Urgent conversations. Naomi stood quietly in the corner holding Leon's hand tightly while strangers examined Gabriel. Everything moved too fast. Finally, one of the doctors stood up. We need to transfer him immediately. Naomi's grip tightened around Leon's hand. Transfer. The doctor nodded. He should have been in a proper medical facility years ago. Those words struck Naomi painfully. Not because they were cruel. Because they were true. She had done everything she could. But love alone could not replace medicine. Eleanor immediately turned toward Naomi. Please, she whispered emotionally. Let me help him. Naomi looked toward Gabriel silently. 4 years. She had prayed for this exact moment. For help. For hope. For a miracle. So why did her chest suddenly hurt so much? Because deep down, she knew something else too. If Gabriel woke up, he might not belong to her anymore. That night, the transfer happened quietly. A large medical vehicle arrived outside the building while neighbors gathered nearby whispering in shock. Naomi sat beside Gabriel the entire ride. Leon asleep against her shoulder. Eleanor sat across from them silently watching. Unable to stop staring at Gabriel. as if afraid he might disappear again. "You never stopped searching for him?" Naomi asked quietly after a long silence. Eleanor smiled sadly. "Everyone else gave up." Her eyes filled with tears again. "But I couldn't." Silence settled softly between them. Then Eleanor looked toward Naomi carefully. "You saved him." Naomi immediately shook her head. "I couldn't even wake him." "No," Eleanor whispered firmly. "You gave him years he shouldn't have survived." Naomi lowered her eyes immediately, emotion tightening painfully inside her chest. Because no one had ever acknowledged what she endured. Not truly. But Eleanor saw it immediately. The exhaustion. The sacrifice. The invisible suffering. And suddenly, the elderly woman understood something deeply painful. This poor young woman had carried Gabriel alone for years. Not for money. Not for status. For love. The Baker estate was nothing like Naomi expected. Massive gates. Luxury cars. Elegant halls. Everything felt unreal. Leon stared around in open amazement while Naomi walked carefully behind the staff carrying Gabriel inside. She felt small there. Too small. Like someone accidentally standing inside another person's world. Doctors immediately surrounded Gabriel again. The best treatment. The best care. The best equipment. Things Naomi could never provide. And somehow, that hurt her more than poverty ever had. Because for the first time, she realized love was not always enough to save someone. Late that night, Naomi sat quietly beside Gabriel's hospital bed inside the estate medical wing. Machines beeped softly around them. The room smelled clean. Cold. Expensive. Leon slept nearby on a couch. Exhausted. Naomi gently touched Gabriel's hand. "You're finally home," she whispered softly. But the words broke her heart the moment she said them. Because she suddenly realized something terrifying. This place was never her home. And if Gabriel woke up, he might remember that too. For the first time in years, Naomi slept without fear. Not deeply. Not peacefully. But enough to close her eyes without wondering whether Gabriel would stop breathing before morning. The doctors monitored him constantly now. Machines surrounded his bed. Nurses moved quietly through the halls at all hours. Everything Naomi had once prayed for was finally happening. And somehow, that terrified her. Because miracles are dangerous when they arrive too late. The Baker estate moved differently from the world Naomi knew. Everything was polished. Controlled. Elegant. Even silence sounded expensive there. Naomi still struggled to understand how Gabriel belonged to a place like this. The unconscious man she loved had built wooden chairs with his hands. Carried water from rivers. Laughed beside village fires. Slept beneath leaking roofs beside her. But here, people called him Mr. Gabriel Baker. As if he had always belonged among wealth and power. Naomi sat quietly beside his bed while doctors discussed treatment plans nearby. Most of their words went over her head. Medical terms. Procedures. Probabilities. But one sentence stayed with her. "He's responding." Naomi immediately looked up. Responding. Her heart began beating painfully fast. The older doctor adjusted his glasses carefully while reviewing the charts. Brain activity has improved significantly. Eleanor stood nearby silently gripping the edge of a table. "Are you saying he'll wake up?" she asked weakly. The doctor hesitated. Then nodded slowly. "We believe there's a strong possibility." Naomi's entire body froze. 4 years. Those were the words she begged heaven to hear. And now suddenly, they were real. Her eyes immediately filled with tears. Leon looked confused beside her. "Father is coming back," he whispered. Naomi pulled him close instantly. "Yes," she whispered shakily. "Yes." But even as she said it, Something deep inside her trembled. Because she didn't know what coming back truly meant anymore. The days that followed felt unreal. Gabriel's fingers moved more often now. Small reactions. Tiny changes. The doctors called it progress. To Naomi, it felt like hope learning how to breathe again. She stayed beside him constantly, holding his hand, speaking softly to him, telling him about Leon, about the village, about the years he lost. Sometimes she cried quietly while talking. Other times she smiled through tears. But every single word carried the same desperate prayer. Come back to us. One evening, Naomi sat alone beside the bed while rain tapped softly against the large windows outside. The room glowed dimly beneath warm lights. Leon was asleep nearby. Eleanor had finally gone to rest. Only Naomi remained awake. Like always. She gently brushed Gabriel's hair away from his forehead. You know, she whispered softly. Leon has your eyes. Silence answered her. But this time, the silence felt thinner somehow. Naomi smiled weakly through tears. He pretends he's strong, she continued quietly. But he misses you so much. Her voice broke slightly. I miss you too. And then, Gabriel's fingers tightened weakly around hers. Naomi froze instantly. Her breathing stopped. Slowly. Very slowly. Gabriel's eyelids twitched. Then opened. For a moment, Naomi forgot how to breathe. His eyes moved slowly across the room in confusion. Disoriented. Weak. Alive. Gabriel, Naomi whispered shakily. His gaze slowly landed on her face. Naomi immediately broke into tears. Laughing and crying at the same time. You woke up. Her hands trembled violently as she held his face gently. You woke up. Gabriel stared at her silently. Confused. Trying to understand. Then finally. His dry lips moved weakly. Who are you? The world stopped. Naomi's smile disappeared instantly. Her body went completely still. What? Gabriel frowned slightly, clearly struggling. Where am I? Naomi's chest tightened painfully. No. No, no, no. Gabriel, it's me. He looked at her carefully. Searching. Trying. But there was nothing in his eyes. No recognition. No warmth. No memory. Only confusion. The monitors beside the bed suddenly began beeping rapidly as doctors rushed into the room. Eleanor followed immediately behind them. Gabriel. The moment he saw Eleanor, his expression shifted. Grandmother. Eleanor immediately burst into tears. Yes. She rushed forward holding his face carefully while crying uncontrollably. My boy. Gabriel looked around weakly. Still confused. Still lost. Then his eyes returned to Naomi. And once again. Nothing. No memory of the woman who spent years saving him. No memory of the child sleeping nearby. No memory of the life they built together. Naomi slowly stepped backward. Her entire body numb now. One of the doctors turned toward Eleanor quietly. It appears his older memories remained intact. A pause. But the trauma likely erased everything after the accident. Everything after the accident. Naomi felt those words destroy something inside her. Because everything after the accident was her. Their marriage. Their son. Their suffering. Their love. Gone. As if none of it ever existed. Leon slowly woke up from the noise nearby. Rubbing his sleepy eyes. Then he saw Gabriel awake. His face immediately lit up with pure joy. Father. Leon ran toward the bed happily. But Gabriel stared at him in complete confusion. The little boy stopped halfway. Silence filled the room. Heavy. Cruel. Gabriel frowned slightly. Whose child is that? And just like that, Naomi's heart finally shattered completely. The room became unbearably quiet. Not the peaceful kind of silence. The cruel kind. The kind that forces pain to sit in front of everyone without mercy. Leon stood frozen beside the bed. Still smiling slightly. Still waiting for his father to recognize him. But Gabriel only looked confused. Nothing more. Whose child is that? He asked again weakly. Naomi felt something collapse inside her chest. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Quietly. Like a final thread finally snapping after years of holding too much weight. Eleanor immediately turned away, covering her mouth as tears filled her eyes again. Even the doctors looked uncomfortable now. No one knew what to say. Because there are some pains words only make worse. Leon slowly looked toward Naomi. Confused. Afraid. Mother. That one word nearly destroyed her. Naomi forced herself to move. Forced herself to breathe. She walked toward Leon carefully and gently pulled him against her side protectively. It's okay, she whispered shakily. But nothing about this was okay. Gabriel watched them silently. Trying to understand why the atmosphere suddenly felt so heavy. I'm sorry, he said weakly. I feel like I should know you. Naomi looked at him. Really looked at him. The same face she loved. The same voice she waited years to hear again. And yet, he felt farther away than ever before. Because losing someone to death is painful. But losing someone while they're still alive, that kind of grief is different. Crueler. The doctor cleared his throat carefully. Mr. Baker suffered severe neurological trauma, he explained gently. Memory loss in cases like this can be unpredictable. Unpredictable. Naomi almost laughed bitterly. After everything life had already taken from her. Of course it would take this too. Gabriel looked toward her again. Were you close to me? The question stabbed straight through her heart. Naomi opened her mouth. Then closed it again. How was she supposed to explain years of love to a stranger wearing her husband's face? Eleanor stepped forward quietly. She's Naomi, she said softly. A pause. She saved your life. Gabriel immediately looked at Naomi differently after hearing that. Not lovingly. Respectfully. And somehow, that hurt even more. Thank you, he whispered sincerely. Naomi's eyes instantly filled with tears again. Because gratitude was not what she wanted from him. She wanted recognition. Memory. Love. She wanted her husband back. But the men staring at her now looked at her the same way he would look at any stranger. And that realization broke something inside her permanently. That night, Naomi sat alone outside the medical wing while rain poured heavily beyond the glass walls. The luxurious hallway around her felt cold despite its beauty. Inside the room, Gabriel slept peacefully after the doctors sedated him again. Leon finally slept too after crying himself to exhaustion. Only Naomi remained awake. Alone with a pain too large to carry. She pressed trembling fingers against her mouth, trying desperately not to break down completely. Years. She gave him years. She carried him through suffering. Protected him. Loved him. Waited for him. And now? He looked at her like she was nobody. A soft sound interrupted her thoughts. Eleanor approached quietly and sat beside her. For a while, neither woman spoke. Then finally, Eleanor whispered, "I'm sorry." Naomi laughed weakly through tears. Not because it was funny. Because she didn't know what else to do. "He remembered you immediately," she whispered painfully. Eleanor lowered her eyes sadly. "And forgot me completely." Silence followed. Heavy. Then Naomi finally asked the question burning inside her heart. "Who was he before me?" Eleanor looked out through the rain silently for a long moment. "Lonely," she answered quietly. Naomi frowned slightly. "He had everything money could buy," Eleanor continued softly. But he trusted the wrong people. Smiled for cameras. Lived around people who loved his name more than his heart. A sad smile crossed the older woman's face. But when he disappeared, her voice broke slightly. I realized how empty that world truly was. Naomi listened quietly. Then looked down at her trembling hands. I don't belong here. Eleanor immediately turned toward her. Naomi. No, Naomi interrupted gently. Her eyes filled again. He woke up into your world. Not mine. And deep down, she already understood the truth. If Gabriel fully returned to his old life, there might not be space for her inside it anymore. The next few days became torture. Gabriel improved quickly physically. Too quickly. He walked again. Spoke clearly again. Remembered business details. Family history. Names. Events. Everything except Naomi. Leon. The village. Their marriage. Their life together. Sometimes Naomi caught him watching her thoughtfully, as if trying to force memories to return. But nothing ever came. And Leon. Leon suffered the most quietly. The little boy still hovered near Gabriel constantly. Still hoping. Still waiting. But every interaction ended the same way. Awkward. Distant. Painful. One afternoon, Leon carefully approached Gabriel holding a drawing. I made this for you. Gabriel smiled politely. That's very nice. Very nice. Not. I'm proud of you, son. Not. Come here. Not. I missed you. Just polite kindness. Leon lowered the drawing slowly, trying not to look hurt. Naomi watched the scene from the doorway while silently dying inside. That night, she made a decision. The next morning, Naomi quietly packed their few belongings. Eleanor found her folding Leon's clothes carefully into an old bag. You're leaving. It wasn't a question. Naomi nodded weakly. I can't stay here anymore. Eleanor's face filled with panic immediately. Naomi, please don't do this. Naomi finally looked at her. Tears already falling again. What am I supposed to do? She whispered brokenly. Watch him remember everyone except us. Silence. Because there was no answer. Naomi looked toward Gabriel's room one final time. I loved him when he had nothing. Her voice trembled painfully. But now he looks at me like I'm part of someone else's story. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears again. Because deep down, she knew Naomi was right. And the cruelest part, Gabriel didn't even realize what he was losing. Naomi did not say goodbye to Gabriel. Not because she hated him. Not because she was angry. But because she knew. If she looked at him one more time, she would stay. And staying would destroy her slowly. The morning was quiet when she finished packing. Too quiet. Leon sat silently on the edge of the bed holding his small bag against his chest. The little boy no longer asked questions. That scared Naomi more than tears. Children should cry. Children should protest. Children should complain when life hurts them. But Leon had learned silence too early. Naomi folded the last sweater carefully and placed it inside the worn bag. Her hands trembled the entire time. This was not how she imagined losing Gabriel. Not after surviving years beside him. Not after carrying him through death itself. To lose him to memory felt crueler somehow. A soft knock interrupted the silence. Eleanor stepped inside slowly. The older woman looked exhausted. Like she had not slept all night. You're really leaving? Naomi nodded weakly. I have to. Eleanor's eyes immediately filled with tears. This is your home too. Naomi smiled sadly. No. Her voice was gentle. Not bitter. That somehow made it worse. This was never my world. Silence settled heavily between them. Eleanor stepped closer suddenly. You saved my grandson. Naomi lowered her eyes immediately. You gave him years no one else could. Tears slid down Naomi's cheeks again. But he doesn't remember those years. That one sentence shattered the room. Because it carried all her pain inside it. Everything she endured. Everything she lost. Everything she waited for. Forgotten. Eleanor reached for Naomi's hands tightly. Please, she whispered emotionally. Stay until his memories return. Naomi closed her eyes painfully. And finally admitted the truth she had been avoiding. What if they never do? Silence. Eleanor had no answer. Because sometimes love loses against fate. And no amount of wealth can fix it. Naomi picked up the bag slowly. Leon stood beside her immediately. Mother. Naomi forced herself to smile softly. It's okay. But her voice broke halfway through the lie. As they stepped into the hallway, Naomi paused one final time. Gabriel's room stood slightly open nearby. She could hear his voice faintly inside. Calm. Strong again. Alive again. Everything she prayed for. And somehow, that hurt more than when he was unconscious. Naomi stared at the door silently. Memories crashed through her painfully. Gabriel laughing beside the river. Gabriel teaching Leon how to hold a spoon. Gabriel carrying firewood while teasing her. Gabriel promising her forever beneath the stars. All of it still lived inside her. Even if it no longer existed inside him. A tear slid silently down her face. Then she turned away. Because sometimes loving someone means leaving before they realize they stopped loving you back. Downstairs, a car waited quietly outside the estate. Eleanor had insisted on helping them settle somewhere safe. Naomi hated accepting it. But for Leon's sake. She swallowed her pride. The servants nearby whispered quietly while watching her leave. Most of them already knew the story. The poor woman who saved the missing heir. The forgotten wife. The child no one remembered. Naomi kept her eyes lowered the entire walk. Leon suddenly stopped moving beside her. Naomi looked down immediately. The little boy stared back toward the mansion silently. Toward Gabriel's window. Mother. Naomi's chest tightened instantly. Can I say goodbye to father? The question nearly destroyed her. She opened her mouth. Then closed it again. Because what kind of goodbye could a child say to a father who no longer remembered him? Still. She nodded softly. Okay. Leon immediately ran back inside. Naomi stood frozen outside the car gripping the bags tightly while fear and heartbreak twisted violently inside her chest. Please. Please don't let this hurt him more. Upstairs, Gabriel sat near the window reviewing documents Eleanor's assistants brought him. Business reports. Old company records. His world was slowly returning. At least the old one was. A soft knock interrupted him. Come in. The door opened slowly. Leon stepped inside nervously. Gabriel immediately softened slightly upon seeing him. Oh. Hey. Not. Son. Just. Hey. Leon walked closer quietly holding the small drawing from before. I'm leaving now, he whispered. Gabriel frowned slightly. Leaving. Leon nodded. Trying hard to stay brave. Mother says we can't stay here anymore. Something uncomfortable twisted inside Gabriel's chest suddenly. A strange feeling he couldn't explain. Where are you going? Leon shrugged weakly. I don't know. Silence filled the room. Then Leon carefully placed the drawing beside Gabriel. It's for you. Gabriel picked it up slowly. It showed. A small house. Naomi. Leon. Gabriel holding both their hands beneath stars. A family. Gabriel stared at it strangely. His chest tightening again. That same unfamiliar ache. Did we know each other before? he asked carefully. Leon's eyes instantly filled with tears. But he still smiled bravely. You were my father. Gabriel froze. The words hit him harder than expected. Not logically. Emotionally. And suddenly, for the briefest moment, something flashed through his mind. A laugh. Warm firelight. A woman smiling beneath stars. A child's tiny hand in his. Then, pain exploded violently through his head. Gabriel grabbed the edge of the table sharply. Leon panicked immediately. Father. The memory vanished instantly. Gone before he could understand it. Gabriel breathed heavily, trying to steady himself. And when he looked back at Leon, confusion returned again. I'm sorry, he whispered painfully. I don't remember. That finally broke Leon completely. The little boy wiped his eyes quickly, trying not to cry. Trying to be strong. Always trying to be strong. It's okay, he whispered weakly. But it wasn't. And both of them knew it. Leon slowly backed toward the door. Then quietly said the words that would haunt Gabriel for years. Mother remembered you every single day. Silence. And I think she was waiting for you to remember us too. Then Leon walked away, leaving Gabriel alone with a strange pain growing violently inside his chest. A pain memory could not explain. Outside, Naomi immediately pulled Leon tightly into her arms the moment he returned. The little boy finally broke down, crying against her shoulder. Silent tears. Exhausted tears. Naomi held him tightly while her own tears fell into his hair. Then quietly, without another word, they drove away from the estate. And from the men they still loved. Gabriel could not sleep that night. No matter how hard he tried. The room was quiet. Comfortable. Luxurious. Yet something about it felt painfully empty. He stood near the large window staring into the darkness outside while rain slid slowly down the glass. The city lights stretched endlessly below him. Familiar. Cold. And somewhere inside that endless city, Naomi and Leon were gone. The thought unsettled him more than it should have. Gabriel pressed a hand against his forehead tiredly. Ever since the little boy left the room earlier, something inside him refused to settle. You were my father. The words replayed over and over inside his mind. Not logically. Emotionally. And worse. The pain in his chest each time he remembered Leon crying felt terrifyingly real. Why? If he truly didn't know them, why did losing them suddenly feel unbearable? Gabriel closed his eyes tightly. And immediately, another flash hit him. Warm laughter. Firelight. A woman's voice whispering softly beside him. Then, mud. Rain. Darkness. Gabriel gasped sharply and opened his eyes again. His breathing uneven now. Fragments. Only fragments. Nothing clear enough to understand. Yet enough to hurt. Across the city, Naomi sat awake beside another tiny rented room window. Not luxurious this time. Not beautiful. Just small. Simple. Temporary. Leon finally slept after crying himself into exhaustion. Curled tightly beneath a blanket too thin for the cold. Naomi stared at him silently for a long time. Then toward the darkness outside. She should have felt relieved. Gabriel was alive. Safe. Home. Everything she prayed for had finally happened. So why did it feel like she had buried him instead? Naomi pressed trembling fingers against her mouth as tears slipped quietly down her cheeks again. Because the truth was simple. The Gabriel she loved still existed somewhere. But she could no longer reach him. And that realization hollowed her from the inside. Days passed. Gabriel returned to business meetings surprisingly quickly. The Baker Empire had waited years for him. Now everyone wanted his attention. His leadership. His return. Executives praised him constantly. Investors celebrated him. The media became obsessed with the miraculous return of the missing heir. But none of it felt real. Gabriel sat through meetings mechanically while strange emptiness followed him everywhere. Even success felt distant now. Muted. "You're recovering remarkably well," one executive said proudly during a meeting. Gabriel nodded absently. But his mind wasn't there. It was somewhere else. A small room. Warm candlelight. A woman smiling tiredly. A child laughing softly. The images flashed again suddenly. Brief. Painfully brief. Gabriel's hand tightened around his pen immediately. "Mr. Baker." He blinked quickly. The room returned. The executive stared at him in concern. "Continue," Gabriel said quietly. But something was wrong. Deeply wrong. Because every time those flashes appeared, his heart reacted before his mind could. As if his body remembered something his memories refused to reveal. That evening, Gabriel found himself staring at Leon's drawing again. The one left behind. He had hidden it inside his desk drawer for reasons he didn't understand. Yet somehow, he kept returning to it. The crude drawing showed happiness so simple it almost hurt to look at. A tiny house. Stars. A family holding hands. And strangely, Gabriel could almost feel the warmth inside the picture. A soft knock interrupted him. Eleanor entered quietly carrying tea. She paused immediately after noticing the drawing in his hand. "You kept it." Gabriel looked down at it silently. "I don't know why." Eleanor's eyes softened sadly. "Yes," she whispered. "You do." Silence filled the room. Then Gabriel finally asked the question haunting him for days. "Who were they to me?" Eleanor's expression immediately changed. Pain. Regret. Sadness. "All your missing years," she answered quietly. Gabriel frowned slightly. "That's not an answer." Eleanor slowly sat down across from him. "No," she whispered. "It's the only answer that matters." Gabriel stared at her carefully. "You loved her." Those words made something inside him tighten violently. "More than yourself." Another flash hit him instantly. Naomi laughing while rain poured outside a tiny house. Her fingers brushing his face softly. A child sleeping between them. Warmth. Peace. Love. Then, the memory disappeared again. Gabriel grabbed the edge of the table sharply. Pain exploded through his head. "Gabriel." He stood suddenly breathing heavily. "Why can't I remember?" he snapped angrily. The frustration shocked even him. Because it wasn't business that upset him. Not the lost years. It was her. The woman whose tears haunted him even without memory. Eleanor stood carefully. "Trauma protects the mind sometimes," she whispered gently. Gabriel laughed bitterly. "Protects." He looked toward the drawing again. Toward the smiling woman beside the badly drawn stars. "It feels more like punishment." Silence followed. Heavy. Then Eleanor quietly revealed the truth Gabriel was not prepared to hear. "She waited for you for years." Gabriel froze. "You were unconscious," Eleanor continued softly. "Doctors gave up on you. People gave up on you." Her voice broke slightly. But Naomi didn't. Gabriel's chest tightened painfully. "She carried you through villages. Fed you when she barely ate herself. Protected you while raising your son alone." Son. That word hit him hardest now. "Leon," Gabriel whispered weakly. Eleanor nodded. "He worshipped you." Gabriel lowered his eyes immediately. A strange guilt flooding him despite not understanding why. Then Eleanor quietly finished the sentence that shattered him completely. "And when you finally woke up." Tears filled her eyes again. "You forgot the people who loved you most." Silence consumed the room. Gabriel stared down at the drawing while something inside him slowly began breaking apart. Because for the first time, he realized memory loss did not erase responsibility. And somewhere out there, the woman who saved his life was crying because of him.